Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to walk us through how we can get our image to rotate using the equations for rotation. So if you haven't already watched my video where I walk through the derivation of these equations, I recommend you do that. So go back and watch the video around section 7.5 so you can see where these equations come from. Alright, so in that video what we saw was if I wanted to rotate something about the origin, about the point 0, 0, which I'm going to do here. You can see that this is the center of my image that I have here, and we're going to get this stuff to rotate around 0, 0. The equations for that were x cosine t minus y sine t. So this is the new x coordinate that I'm going to have after I rotate around the origin by an angle t. And for the y coordinate, we had x sine of t plus y cosine of t. All right, so if you set up your Desmos worksheet something similar to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up copying and pasting these two equations a bunch of times. So I think it's pretty helpful just to have them typed in to your worksheet. And so if you do that, it should prompt you to add a slider here, t. And so if I click this button, add a slider t, what this is going to be is this is going to control my rotation. So this is going to be my angle t. And to do a full rotation, I want it to rotate by an angle of a full 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. And so I'm going to go ahead and make this slider go from 0 to 2 pi. So right now it does nothing, but when I start changing these equations, we'll see that it does. Okay, so my tip for you is if you have something that you want to rotate, I would go ahead and create your image first so that you have the equations for it. So you can see here I have all the equations for my image, and I'm going to get this to rotate around. So once I have the equations, I'm going to go ahead and just start replacing anytime I see an x. Like I have two x's in this equation, I'm going to replace it with my equation for x. And anytime I have a y, I'm going to go ahead and replace it with my equation for y. So let's go ahead and do the first one. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. And I have an x here, so I'm going to paste that equation for x. And I have an x here, I'm going to paste that equation for x. So you'll notice that this, if you were just to see this or try to type this out from the start, it starts to look pretty complicated. But we know, since we created this line, we know what it is, and it's not so complicated, right? So this right here is just the equation for the line that I have over here, y equals x. And by copying and pasting these things in, I made my life a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and see what happens to this line as I let the slider move. Okay, so as I let the slider move, you'll see that my line over here is rotating around the origin, right? So it's spinning right around this point right here. And so what you can do is you can make it go continuously by just changing these values on the slider. So if you want to slow it down, you can slow it down. If you want to speed it up, you can make it go really fast, right? Or whatever you want. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make all four of these lines rotate just like this one is. And so what I'll do is I'll go through and I'm just going to replace all of my x's with my equation for x and all my y's with my equation for y. So let's go ahead and let's do our x's here. So I have an x here. Now I have an x here, but it's a negative x. So I want to make sure that the negative goes with the entire x here, right? So I have to put that in parentheses. And then I have my y. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this with my y. Let's see, now we have 2, right? So now we have 2 lines that will rotate around. And if I go ahead, I'll do my x's again in my next one, right? So I see I have an x here in my domain restriction. And I have a y here, y equals 0, and now I have an x over here for x equals 0, and I have a y here, my domain restriction. So if I let this play, you can see now that I have my entire star that's rotating around. And so sometimes what you'll find, depending on your image, if you don't want it to rotate in a full circle, in full 360 degrees here, I can instead, I could change my the bounds on my slider. So sometimes you just want your image to bounce back and forth. And so if I wanted, say, my image to just sort of bounce back and forth like this, by just changing the bounds on the slider and changing sort of how it loops, if it bounces back and forth, if it goes straight through, you can see that we get this bouncing effect. And you can play around with the bounds on your slider to get the effect that you want, right? So if you wanted to move more or less, you can change it that way. Okay, so my last note here is this was specifically to rotate around the origin, 0, 0. So if you want to rotate around a different point, which I think some of you will, I'm going to go ahead and create another video that shows us how to rotate around a point that's not the origin. So thanks for watching.